What I found is when I was working on Girl Wars and being interviewed and talking to groups about that book, inevitably the question came up of what happens to these girls when they grow up. And also, many adult women would approach me, and even some men, and say, hey, this doesn't go away. I see it all the time in my workplace. So that led me to become curious, and I looked to see if there was anything like this kind of a book, Mean Girls Grown Up, which there wasn't. So I decided I would write that book, and I solicited stories from women all across the country and did some interviews, and that became what this was about. I discovered that this kind of dynamic isn't isolated to the workplace. It occurs in the community, it occurs in the PTA, it occurs at church, synagogue, wherever. But certainly the workplace is really a big area where relational aggression occurs between women. And interestingly enough, I was asked by my publisher if I had any statistics. Again, I went into the literature. There's nothing specific to women, so I had the opportunity to just sort of informally ask a group of 60 women how many of them had ever suffered the consequences of relational aggression at work. And a third of them had left a job because of these kinds of issues, and a third of them had missed at least one day of work. Several had stories of, I had to take a leave of absence, I was offered a promotion, I didn't take it because I knew the fallout would be terrible. So it is a dynamic that really impacts on women in the work setting. Again, I think because it may be that mentality that we're competing for so few spots, and I want that spot, and if you get it, I won't get something else. And it really brings out that aggressive tendency for someone who maybe hasn't learned a better way. Maybe she was aggressive as a young woman in middle school and found she got her way because everyone was intimidated and afraid of her. If she doesn't change her behavior, it'll continue right into adulthood. Right now, businesses are very concerned about this dynamic because they recognize that it impacts on productivity, absenteeism, all these kinds of things. And I've read about several corporate programs targeted specifically at female bosses who are very aggressive and have had some difficulties. But that only gets at one individual, and I think that there needs to be a much broader awareness that all women can be involved in this dynamic, that there are other players in the dynamic who are affected by it, and to sort of consciousness raise for men and women that interacting in an aggressive way, that's going to get you ahead at the expense of others, it really does boomerang back, and no one is going to work well with you ultimately. No one is going to pick you to be on, their task forces. No one is going to encourage you for promotion because they're going to recognize that you're a person who doesn't really interact with their coworkers in a positive way. I think that certainly there was that era where women were taught to be submissive, to be sweet, to be nice, to be the nurturer, and to not speak up when you were upset. And maybe some of what we're seeing now is sort of a backlash from that because we don't want young girls to be passive, to be taken advantage of, to not get ahead in situations where maybe there are odds stacked against them because of their gender. So we don't want that. And I think that what needs to happen is girls need to have a bigger skill set. They need to learn from men their skills. What kinds of tools do their dads use? What kind of tools do men use in the work environment that we can use to advance ourselves without becoming that aggressive person, without seeing that the only way this is going to happen for me is if I, climb up on the backs of other women and, really get ahead at their expense.